The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
You are now tuned in to the PA Power Podcast, College Edition, featuring Mason Beckman and Tristan Warner. PA Power Wrestling. Pennsylvania is wrestling.
Welcome in, wrestling fans. You are now dialed into the PA Power College Podcast. As Jason Bryant of the Mat Talk Podcast Network said, I'm Tristan Warner, joined by my main man, as always, Mason Beckman, a.k.a. Beck Diggity. Mason, episode 23, ready to rock and roll?
Yes, sir. Ready to rock and roll. Episode 23. It's actually going to come out on my 25th birthday, so the podcast is almost as old as I am.
Did not know that. Happy early birthday to you, my friend.
Thanks, doggy dog. So yeah, the podcast is catching up to us in age. It's maturing so quickly. Unfortunately,
It really is. It's a beautiful thing to see, too.
Unfortunately, I don't think you and I are ever going to completely mature, but that's what makes this fun to listen to.
I almost feel like we're going in the opposite direction, but it's too late for us.
Without question. Speaking of this being fun to listen to, anybody who listens, you guys got to step up. We've had a lack of listener questions, so you guys are no fun. I'm going to call you on it right now. Yeah, listener base. Calling you out.
Yeah, me and Mason are beginning to question, we threw out on our outline here listener questions, but there are none, and we're questioning, does anyone even listen anymore? So if so, feel free to drop us a line on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and hit us up with some topics or some questions that you want us to talk about, even if they're completely irrelevant. We have a fun time babbling about nothing on here, so if you haven't noticed.
That is for sure. So before we get into things, our special guest, which will be a little ways into this podcast, will be Army West Point head coach Kevin Ward. Awesome conversation. We talk about all things Army West Point, his journey from being part of the Oklahoma State program, 4 national title teams there. He was a grad assistant there. Then he took a program that literally didn't exist. He started was the first ever head coach at Ouachita Baptist University in Arkansas, and now in his 4th year at Army West Point. So stick around for that. That's an awesome conversation. So that said, first thing we got to throw out there, and this is purely on us. I had this on our outline last week, and my guess is it just got lost in the shuffle. Seton Hill took second at the National Duels a few weeks ago. Great showing by them. They went on a ridiculous run of beating top 10, top 5 teams. Ended up in the finals. They end up second. Great showing for Seton Hill. It's a program that is really doing a lot of good things. And again, Division II, Division III schools definitely fly under the radar. They don't get talked about as much. And for us, it's a little bit hard. All of the things that, 99% of the conversations that people have, I know at least with me, Tristan, I'm sure you're probably the same way, are regarding Division I topics. So, we kind of get caught up in that, and I'm sure we're a little guilty of it too. So, but shout out to Seton Hill. Sorry that it took us a week longer than it should have, but outstanding job.
Speaking of the word outstanding, Mason, we got a couple prime candidates for Outstanding Wrestlers of the Week. Why don't you start us off?
Outstanding Wrestlers of the Weekend. So the easy one that, quite frankly, I'm kind of going to throw out because he's such an easy pick is Spencer Lee. Knocks off Nathan Thomas.
Hey, let me say he was an easy pick for Outstanding Wrestler, but he wasn't such an easy pick for Mason Beckman when we had this podcast last week when we were going over the upcoming matches of the weekend. And the Spencer Lee and Nate Tomasello match came up.
Hang on. That is the next bullet point on this outline. We will get there because I call myself out for this. So hold that thought. But yeah, Spencer Lee, without question, the outstanding wrestler of the weekend, not just for Pennsylvania guys, but nationwide. Goes into Columbus in front of how many thousands of people, knocks off Nathan Tomasello, a 3-time All-American, a national champ from a few years back. Spencer Lee removed any doubt as to whether or not he can really legitimately contend for a national title. So we'll put Spencer there, and then let's start a subcategory of non-Spencer Lee outstanding wrestlers.
Yeah, and non-PA wrestlers at that.
Yeah, so Spencer kind of covers all bases, right? So the other ones, I would say probably my number one outstanding wrestler from the weekend, Nick Wanzik, who is Minnesota's 165. Kind of flies under the radar. He's a senior for Minnesota this year, and he's always been good, but he's never been that elite tier. And to those of you who really follow the Big Ten, he pushed Isaiah Martinez. I think he lost to him like 8-5 a couple weeks ago. And then this past weekend wrestled Logan Massa against Michigan. Massa goes out, scores the first 3 takedowns. He's up 6-2, looks like he's rolling. Then Wanzek takes down in the second. Massa tries to tilt him, and Wanzek kind of floats his hips over, catches a headlock on the way over, almost pins Massa, gets 6 points out of it, and then it kind of snowballed from there, and I think he ends up winning the match by 7. So Wanzik, just a super impressive win. His first really real big win. But yeah, that's my non-Spencer Lee outstanding wrestler. What about you?
Quite a few others we have on this list. I mean, you wrote Bryce Meredith, obviously got a big win over Seth Gross in that epic 133-141 kind of fusion match there with South Dakota State and Wyoming. Looked like a really good match, some good scrambles. Meredith came out on top by 2, but I'm also going to throw out Seth Gross just from a pure guts factor for taking on that challenge to bump up a weight against the number 1 guy in the country. And, that's what the sport needs. That's the kind of things that we want to see, the fans want to see. So shout out to both of those guys. And then not only that, but both of them being extremely good sports and very humble about it on Twitter afterward, if you saw that. So I want to say outstanding wrestler to both of those guys. Maybe the first time we've had an outstanding wrestler who actually lost, but I'll throw out both of those guys. And then Drew Mattin, the 125-pounder from Michigan, had a big win over Ethan Lezak over the weekend. That was a little bit surprising. Lezak has taken a couple losses as of late. And then also Missouri's 149-pounder Grant Leith, who was a transfer from Duke. He's back in his home state, and he's now moved up to number 3 in the rankings.
A neck brace.
Just beat Justin Oliver from Central Michigan, who's having quite a good year. So in a neck brace, yeah, you can see on his Intermat picture. I think he's the picture they used as the for this week's rankings, style. And yeah, he's definitely got the NFL linebacker neck roll as it looks.
So those are the outstanding wrestlers of the weekend. By the way, Grant Leith, Missouri in general, they're like the number 3 or 4 team in the country, or like maybe number 5, but whatever. Nobody talks about them, and it just baffles me. And I realize they didn't wrestle Scuffle, Midlands, or Vegas, but Missouri has consistently been an elite team for the past, I'd probably say 5 years.
Probably even longer than that, I'd say. Probably since I was in middle school, they've been an elite team.
I don't think they've been like elite, as in like consistent top 5 for like that long.
Dating back to the Askerins, I mean, they've had
no question,
multiple All-American seasons every year, I would say.
That I completely agree with. Like, they've been a top flight program, but then like team trophy kind of team. Yeah, Missouri flies under the radar. I don't get it, but yeah. Anyway, challenge bricks. So I'm throwing a challenge brick at myself for doubting Spencer Lee. That's on me. He told me to shut my mouth. So he didn't actually tell me that. His performance did. So, and I will say this. I'll say 2 things. Number 1, I will freely admit Spencer is better than I thought he was right now. My doubt came from
Ronnie Bresser.
The fact that no, it didn't come from Bresser, because if the Bresser matches, number 1, Bresser is a incredibly hard person to wrestle. So that one doesn't, really give me pause. Especially after the way Bresser competed against Suriano. You know, and he obviously presented those same challenges to Suriano. No, my doubt, the doubt in my mind about Spencer came from the fact that, you know, that knee injury, and he completely missed the whole summer leading into his true freshman year. And for anybody that's gone through the transition into Division I athletics, into college athletics, not just Division I, it's a huge jump. And that first summer is very, very important, especially if you're going to be in the lineup as a true freshman. Spencer spent that whole time rehabbing. And obviously, you know, you can do a lot of things while you're rehabbing, but it's still, you know, it's not quite the same, right? So it's not that I obviously his knee is healthy, ready to go and everything. That amount of time off the mat and not being able to make the transition physically, that was what kind of gave me pause. But clearly, it doesn't matter. He's really, really good. So I'm smacking myself in the head with a challenge brick. What about you?
I don't think I really had one this week. Not that I could think of.
Oh, come on. There was stuff all over the place. You gotta be better. I expected more out of you.
No. Not that I really saw. Not that I can think of off the top of my head, at least. I'll throw my challenge brick at you, Mason, for an absolute freak out at me via text message when I sent you a picture of myself wearing a Cornell hat. That's my challenge brick.
Okay. I completely stand by the comments that I made. I cannot repeat them on this podcast because we like to make it's a family program, and I can't say what I said on a family program. The fact that you sent that, so for the listeners, Tristan texted me a picture of him wearing a Cornell wrestling hat on Saturday morning. This was a grand total of about 12 hours after Lehigh lost to Cornell in the duel. I told him I did not appreciate that in not so many words. The real beauty of this situation is that Tristan didn't even know that Lehigh and Cornell had wrestled the night before. It was sheer happenstance that my jag-off of a co-host texted me that picture.
Yeah, you're probably ruining my credibility there. I should have known because we had just talked about it on the podcast a couple days before. We were previewing. We said Lehigh was about to wrestle Cornell. For whatever reason, it slipped my mind. Didn't check the results Friday night. So Saturday morning, kind of stumbled across that Cornell hat, threw it on, and was like, here's an EIWA rival. I know Mason had his fair share of battles with some Cornell boys over the years. Not to name any names, but Nashawn Garrett might sting a little bit. So, I took the picture, snapped a selfie.
I also wrestled Mark Gray like 300 times.
Yeah, Mark Gray also a stud for Cornell. But regardless, I snapped a selfie with myself with the Cornell hat, doing a little point at Mason. Sent it over his way. Thought it would be good for a laugh, but no. It turns out here, little did I know, just hours before, Cornell had put a shellacking on the Mountain Hawks and
all right,
sent Mason heading for the hills, and it wasn't a good situation, folks. So that's a challenge brick. I don't know whether to throw it at myself or him, but
I'm throwing it at you for not knowing that they wrestled. Anyway, actually that's an easy segue. So Lehigh Cornell for weekend results. Let's get through this one quickly because I don't really want to dwell on it. So no Scotty Parker, Ryan Price for Lehigh at 33 and 84 respectively. Matches really of note. So Nick Farrow, the Lehigh's backup 133, lost in overtime to Chaz Tucker. That the team score, for those who care, I want to say either 24-13, no, 23-14. 23-14.
25-12, was it?
I think. Yeah, it was 23-14. I know it was within 12 because I know it was the two tight ones. If they'd have gone the other way, the duel goes the other way. But regardless, so overtime loss at 33, and then Court Schuyler got taken down in the last minute by Will Cole to lose at 149. Really probably the matchup of the night that materialized was Jordan Cutler with another good win. Wins over returning All-American Brandon Womack. Womack up a weight from 165 last year, where he All-American, becoming, I think, the first ever Alabama native to All-American. So, fun fact there.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, just not a good night for the alma mater here.
Let's talk for a second about the assassin.
No, we're not. I refuse. I will just.
Let's go there.
I will talk over you until we move on.
Let's go there real quick. Let's visit
no.
the assassin.
No.
For those fans who don't know.
All right, moving on. Penn State, Purdue, and Maryland weekend. Nick Lee continues to impress, man. He's real deal good. He teched Nate Limix, who was ranked like 18th.
He's bonus point good over top 20 competition.
Yeah, like consistently. And then majored Ryan Deal. He scored like 47 points in 2 matches. The matchup of the Penn State Maryland duel, really the only one of legitimate. Well, I guess Lee and Deal, but Nick Nevels picked up a win over Yusuf Hamida, who's ranked 8th, I think. So that was kind of like a 7-8 matchup there. Good win for Nevels. The 197 situation continues to be a bit of a head scratcher, as far as it just continues to look like Rashid is the guy with results. So he pins his kid against Purdue. Kassar wins by major against Maryland, but I mean, am I crazy, or does Rashid look a lot more impressive?
I mean, to me, Rashid obviously looks more impressive. That cradle seems to be almost unstoppable, and then even when he doesn't get a pin, he just wrestled my ex-teammate who's now at Michigan, Kevin Beasley, who's a returning All-American, who's ranked, he hasn't had a great season so far, but he's still ranked close to the top 10, and Rashid beat him 7-1, so, he's looking pretty dominant even when he's not pinning guys.
Yeah, so, again, I know we kind of touch on this every week, but it's going to be interesting to see how the situation plays out moving forward. Dual meet of the weekend, without question, Ohio State, Iowa, so there's a lot to unpack here. Spencer Lee, Nathan Tomasello. 3-2 win for Spencer. Tomasello with the only takedown in the match. Spencer with 2 escapes and a riding time point. They go nothing out of the first. And Spencer rides him out in the second. So that in and of itself right there, just the second period, was a fascinating thing to see for a lot of reasons. Number one, it begs the question, will Tomasello take bottom again? I no way in my mind, right?
Oh man, I feel like in a high profile match like that, it's hard to not take bottom, especially when he was so close to getting out so many times. So I would almost say he might. Yes, it's kind of like you said, Mason, in the beginning when you were having, a couple episodes ago when we were having that debate with you and Willie Saylor about do you take bottom on Lee in January, lessons to make adjustments from, and then come March when it matters, maybe he has those adjustments made.
Okay, so for me, it's a situational thing in March. So one of the other things here was, and I mentioned it already, Tomasello had the only takedown, and Tomasello was really the only one, other than when Spencer almost had a go behind at the very end off a Tomasello shot. Tomasello was the only one that could consistently generate scoring chances on their feet. So, if you're Tomasello and the Ohio State corner, do you basically just say, okay, you've got 3 minutes on your feet in the first, we're going to take neutral, we give ourselves at least, bare minimum, 5 minutes. And one takedown in 5 minutes still at least gets you to overtime.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know what I mean? Not to mention, if you just want to start Spencer up right away, you've got 7 minutes to get him twice. And based on what we saw in the Ohio State-Iowa duel, obviously Spencer did an incredible job of fending off that last shot, which I still don't know how Spencer didn't get taken down. That was incredibly impressive. But if you're Tomasello and the other thing, look, in 7 minutes, are they gonna would they let a guy, right or wrong, do you think they would let Spencer win a 1-0 match with all 7 minutes on their feet?
Yeah, especially with how many shots Tomasello takes and kind of did take in that match, it's hard to fathom that Lee wouldn't at least get banged for stalling if Tomasello's firing off that many shots and Lee's kind of defending them all for 7 minutes on his feet. But I also want to say, from maybe a bias, PA spent the whole summer rehabbing. You were kind of questioning whether he was going to be ready. And I feel like just even from the time he stepped on the mat at Midlands till now, I feel like he's already gotten better. And I feel like in 2 more months, come late March, or these two will probably wrestle at Big Tens, beginning of March, I feel like Lee's upside, he's just going to keep getting better. Whereas, I mean, Tomasello's a 5th-year senior. Not to say that he can't improve until March, but I don't know. I just see Lee's upside being so good right now that if he can go out there with, even Brands, I think, said something in a post-match interview about how he was kind of questioning Lee's conditioning maybe, or saying something along those lines, the weight cut, a 1-hour weigh-in that was too. I mean, all these factors come into mind for me. Spencer Lee come March, I mean, that's scary. If he did it now, I feel like he could do it again.
I totally agree. And I think at this point, Tomasello kind of is who he is.
Exactly. That's what I was going for.
Spencer, and the reason
Spencer
I say
is nowhere near where he's going to be.
The reason I say I think Tomasello is who he is, he still has a lot of room to get better, but he's been in the same environment, in the same room at Ohio State for 5 years, and his focus has been the same, which has been on folk style. So, you're not going to change who you are in a span of a month and a half. Now, Spencer, it's his first year in the Iowa room, in a Division I room. Spencer still has a lot of room to make those jumps, so it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But not to stay on that too long. 133 in that duel. Luke Pletcher gets another big win. He just keeps on rolling. Mikey Kemmerer over Micah Jordan. Good win for Kemmerer over a fellow All-American. The only thing about this bout that kind of stuck out to me was when Micah got his last takedown, it kind of looked, and if you watched Mikey run off, it looked like there was a limp to Mikey's gait when he walked off the mat. So hopefully he's all right. Nothing too serious there. Caleb Young did a heck of a job against Bo Jordan, up a weight, and doesn't give up the major against a national title contender, a national finalist. And then the only other thing I had on here, but I think for time's sake we'll kind of roll through it. For as good as they are, Ohio State, again relatively, struggles on bottom.
They are from Ohio. They are from the Midwest. Let's keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's fair. But it was really interesting to me to see that. And it's all relative.
I'll probably catch some backlash for that, but hey, I mean, all 5 years I was at Old Dominion, I always caught flack for Pennsylvania style, stallers, this, and that. So
just because we know how to wrestle on the mat doesn't mean we're stalling, by the way.
Exactly my point. People from the Midwest typically a little more prone to having problems on the mat than Pennsylvanians. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes.
Leave it at that.
So moving on, Minnesota, Michigan. Ethan Lezak takes another loss, this time to Drew Matten. Really a strange situation. So Lezak they came back to the center with 6 seconds left in the match. Lezak is winning by 2. He's winning 1-0 on the scoreboard with riding time locked. And he gets taken down in 6 seconds. So that in and of itself was bizarre. Then Matten, they get to the 30-30s. Matten takes neutral, finds a way to get a takedown, and stalls out on the bottom. So Matten picks up the win over Lezak there. Lezak's always been a guy that kind of takes funky losses. I'm curious to see if, in light of his NCAA performance last year, are people game planning that much harder for Ethan Lezak? Are people maybe game planning even more and starting to figure it out a little bit? Or is it just Lezak being Lezak and he'll be backpacking his way to the semis and finals in March? Just going to be really interested to see how that plays out. Other results of note in this duel, we talked about Wanzik and Massa. Stevan Micic pinned Mitch McKee. Micic, after the loss to Pletcher, losses to 2 PA guys, now that I think about it. Pletcher and just the drubbing that DeSanto gave him in Vegas. Micic has gotten back to the guy that we expected him to be all season. So, yeah. Anything on that duel?
No, you pretty much hit it all. Those were the couple things I was going to talk about too.
So, easy segue here. Austin DeSanto. Austin DeSanto's back on the mat. Good news. His cranium has been cleared. Drexel goes 2-0 on the weekend, wins over West Point and Columbia. Not only is DeSanto back, but he scored 47 points in 2 matches.
Him and Nick Lee, I think they scored about the exact same.
It's like just outrageous. You shouldn't be able to do that.
I think it took me like half a season to score that many points when I was a freshman.
There were seasons I doubt I scored that many in the first semester. I did a lot of winning, but the first semester, while my body was still adjusting to weighing 135 all the time instead of weighing 158, it was a process. Anyway, Edinburgh, rough weekend for them with losses to Rider and Virginia Tech. Some good wins for their guys, though. Corbin Myers over Dennis Gustafson of Virginia Tech. Billy Miller with a win over Andrew Dunn. Andrew Dunn, actually a PA native. And then Andrew Shomers over BJ Clagan. Clagan continues to be a complete enigma. One of the biggest ones in college wrestling.
Just a mystery. An absolute mystery.
The biggest enigma in college wrestling, it's not even close, is Alec Pantaleo. But Clagan might be second.
And those two wrestled in the All-Star Classic. How about that?
Yeah, that's like kind of how the connection happened in my head right there.
Yeah.
If you want to try to make sense.
Actually, you know what? That's a great question for next time. I think I'm going to throw out my own listener question there. For next episode, we should compile a list of the biggest inconsistent mystery men in D1 wrestling.
That'll be interesting. Not a bad thought. Write that down.
Mark it down.
Virginia Tech gets a win over Pitt. Forey's over Gustafson. Nick Zanetta loses a tight one to Brent Moore. Solomon Chisco's back. Good news there. Back in the Virginia Tech lineup. Solomon picks up a win in his return to the Hokie lineup, so it's good to see him back in the lineup, scrapping it up. Clarion wins a shutout over George Mason. Lehigh gets back on track on Sunday with a win over West Point. Arizona State update on the brothers Josh. Josh Maruka goes 2-0 on the weekend. Shields goes 1-0 with a win over Paul Fox, who's a Stanford All-American. So another good win for Josh Shields, who was a...
Speaking of Maruka, I noticed Surtis is in the rankings now, 9th at 149. So has Maruka officially lost his spot?
No, because Surtis then didn't make weight for the Oregon State duel. So, yeah.
That'll get you.
Yeah, that'll get you. You got to make weight. You got to qualify to compete.
Exactly. Let's hit the weekend preview before we hit our last miscellaneous topic.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead.
All right, starting off with the Big Ten. We got Penn State versus Minnesota and Rutgers this weekend. Minnesota maybe not quite the team that they usually are, would you say? Still obviously a lot of tough individuals, but I think there's a couple holes in that lineup that are maybe uncharacteristic. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I would agree that it's not they're not, I mean, they're still very, very good, but it's not quite the team that we came to know for, that was a perennial national title contender, yeah.
In the last decade or so. Yeah, obviously still some good matchups, though. Corey Keener against McKee at 133. We'll see. Keener, I think, picked up a nice pin against Maryland. See if he can keep the wins rolling, keep the momentum rolling into this weekend. Nick Lee against Tommy Thorne will be a very interesting one at 141. We'll see what Lee's really made of. He's been pretty much majoring or pinning everybody so far, at least in the last few weeks. We'll see how he does against Tommy Thorne. Nick Wanzek against Chenzo could be very interesting. Chenzo, obviously, number one, dominating this year, but Wanzek's kind of slowly, like you said, creeping his way up the rankings and pulling off wins over guys that he probably is not expected to beat, so that'll be a nice challenge for him. And then we go on to Rutgers. 125 won't really be a match, but it'll be interesting to see Nick Suriano wearing a Scarlet Knights singlet against his former team, Penn State. And
I didn't even think about that.
You didn't even write that one in the outline there, Mason. But
yeah, that will be interesting.
That's the number one thing that came to mind for me.
This duel's at Rutgers, right? Yeah.
So he's home turf there against his former squad. 133, Keener gets another tough one. Tough weekend for Keener. He's got Scott Del Vecchio. And then Chenzo obviously also has a tough back-to-back stretch with U23 world champ who somehow is not even ranked in the top 10.
He doesn't deserve
in
to
the
be.
country, Richie Lewis. Yeah, no, I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be. I'm just saying it's ironic to win a world title and then not be in the top 10 in your own country. Different style, granted, but you know where I'm going.
Yeah, that's fair. So there'll be some pretty good matchups there, and then just continuing to watch the 197 situation for Penn State. The next one, probably you got to say the biggest duel involving a Pennsylvania team in the weekend would be Lehigh at Virginia Tech. A couple of top 10, top 12 teams. So, question marks about Scotty Parker and Ryan Price. I don't have a clue if they're in the lineup or not, so don't ask. But if Lehigh's healthy, you'll see Parker Gustafson, a match that was close that Parker won at the Northeast Duels Journeyman What's-A-Jigger thing. Luke Karam and Brent Moore will be a good one. Court Schuyler, Solomon Chisco. 65, Gordon Wolf and all his funkin' and goofing and rolling around. He'll take on David McFadden, who's ranked third in the country for Tech. 84, if Price is in the lineup, we'll get to see Price and Zavatsky hit again. Zach Zavatsky, obviously a Greater Latrobe grad, Pennsylvania native. That's a match we saw at that same journeyman thing that Price won with an overtime takedown, I do believe. And then up at heavyweight, Jordan Wood, Andrew Dunn, couple guys that grew up probably about 45 minutes away from each other. But, an hour, maybe more than that, maybe about an hour between Boyertown and Bethlehem Catholic. So, a lot of great matchups there. Two really good teams. Going to be a fun dual meet to watch. Hopefully, it doesn't take years off my life like some of them do. But,
Hopefully, I'll be able to find a nice Virginia Tech hat laying around. I can snap you a picture before that one.
I
or maybe
think I
after
have
that
a
one.
Virginia Tech wrestling shirt somewhere around this place. So, that aside, other duels, Pitt at North Carolina. We'll see an all-whippeal match with AC Headley and Nick Zanetta. Troy Heilman, one of the highest-ranked guys in the country at 149. 49. He'll take on Robert Lee. Lockhaven Ryder.
Oh, boy.
Here's a big match. Chance Marsteller, Chad Walsh. What are your thoughts here?
Could be fireworks, or it could be a whole lot of nothing. I could see it going either way.
No way, dude. No match. No.
Couple of the close matches we've seen Chance wrestle this year. A couple of matches against good guys, I'll say, have been very low scoring. I think, at least.
I know, but it's Chad Walsh. Something absurd will happen.
I've seen Chad Walsh win a couple matches close, I think. Like low scoring close. I mean, if he doesn't get his weird stuff, I could see that being a match where Chance doesn't really shoot much and Chad Walsh then therefore doesn't really have the opportunity to hit his weird reach back half or reach back headlock, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I don't know. I could be totally wrong.
He does some of the most outrageous things in Division I wrestling.
I do remember this exact conversation we had about the Lee Tomasello match this time last week. Us saying that if Lee was going to win, he was going to have to win a high-scoring match, like 7-6, I think was what I picked, and look what the score was. So you never know.
Yeah, I never thought Spencer would rat him out. Even you, who picked him, didn't think that.
No, but that led to another point that I was going to make: is how important it is. Where there's so many times, even I remember in my college career, where you'd be wrestling a guy where you have that little thought in your head, especially when the guy gets to his feet, you're going for like a mat return position, and you have to strain so hard to hold him down, and there's that little thought in your head that it's like, just let him go. It's not worth the effort. Maybe I'll be able to make this point up somewhere else, get a takedown or something. But you could just tell Spencer Lee, sheer determination, did everything in his power to keep that guy down and won him the match. So that's the value of the riding time point in college wrestling.
You got to wrestle all three positions, and all three are extremely important. Yeah, so other duels, you got Edinburgh at Clarion as well as Bucknell at Penn. All kinds of crazy PA power going on there. Gonna be 20 high quality bouts between those two teams, or those 4 teams. I'm sorry, in those 2 dual meets. But that that kind of wraps up the weekend preview, and I think we've got time for one random topic that kind of popped into my head. So, and it kind of sets up our conversation with Army West Point head coach Kevin Ward, because we kind of discussed this. Every year you see there are rule changes and updates and this, that, and the other thing that go on in college wrestling. And every year it takes athletes, coaches, and fans months, maybe they don't even completely understand them until after the NCAA tournament has already happened. And then a couple months later, they go get changed again, and we repeat the same process again and again and again and again and again. College wrestling needs, we should not be able to change rules every single year. You look at, especially when rules are so when they're judgment calls, right? Like with the out-of-bounds stalling and with things. Like the out-of-bounds stalling has gotten better as time has gone on because it's been clearer and clearer, right? People have kind of settled into the rule. It's become a more widely accepted, this is stalling, this isn't stalling. When you constantly change things, little things every year, and Tristan, you remember how it is. As an athlete, it's like, dude, I give up. I quit. Because you can't keep up.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I feel like we're beating a dead horse almost because we talk about this so much, but the rule changes, not only are the ones you're talking about especially so subjective, where, what is stalling? I mean, is there even really a precise definition? Sometimes you'll have a guy run off the mat 8 times in a row and the ref doesn't call it. Another time you'll get shot off the mat 1 time and it's a stall. So it's so up for interpretation. It's so up to the ref's discretion. It's sometimes even influenced by the crowd, influenced by, the singlet that the other guy's wearing, whose arena it's in. I mean, it's so subjective. But yeah, in terms of what you're talking about, they do change the rules too often. They don't leave enough time for refs, coaches, and the wrestlers to get accustomed to the rules. So, I mean, it's a circus, but
yeah,
we're making the most of it, I guess.
You do what you can with the hand you're dealt, so. All right, well, I tell you what.
In some ways, I was saying, in some ways, it seems like it's a different sport every couple of years. I mean, I don't think you were in college still when they had the 4-point near fall. I mean, that would have helped me a lot, being top being my best position. But it's just so many rule changes all the time. It's just like, how would these affect the outcomes of matches that happened a couple of years ago? Who knows? But
yeah, I was
beside the
that
fact.
came in, the 4-point near fall came in my senior year for whatever that's worth. But yeah, you just got to give it time with these rules, changing things constantly. Leaving out the fact that it's exhausting to try to relearn stuff every year. You don't give officials, coaches, and athletes nearly enough time to really legitimately learn and be able to wrestle through these rules. So I think we would benefit from some sort of, kind of review period. Say, give it 2 years, before it's up for review again. But tell you what, that said, like I said, that's going to make a really good segue for our conversation with Army West Point head coach Kevin Ward. So we're going to throw it over to that. After that, we'll bring it back home, wrap it up, and send you guys into a friggity fresh weekend of college wrestling. Joining us on the program now, the head coach of the Army West Point Black Knights, Oklahoma State grad, head coach Kevin Ward. Coach, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, Mason, thanks for having me, man. Glad to be with you.
So, you're in your 4th year at Army West Point, and that's a program that, truth be told, until I really started digging in, to the research for this interview, I didn't know a ton about the background of it. And you guys, it's a program that, doesn't have the history that some others do, in terms of results and things like that. And, looking at the turnaround that you've already started, you guys were 7-5 last year. It was your first winning season as a head coach at Army. In your first 3.5 years now, what has really been the focus and what has really driven your turnaround efforts?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a loaded question. I mean, I think it's been several things, but it all goes back to the culture that you want to build and the culture that you want to create within a program. But, inside of that, it's not one thing, it's 1,000 things, that go into it, down to the details of, the conversations that you have with the guys daily and the things that you allow to be said or not said, and the things like the messages that you send, the signs you post in the locker room, all the way down to, the way that you train and the way that you recruit. I was pretty fortunate coming into the program. It's not like I took over a program that wasn't a startup program like I had been before, and it's not a program that had been neglected by any means. So there was a lot to work with when I came on. I guess our focus, over the past 3.5 years is, like every program that's successful and wants to be successful, we put a heavy focus on recruiting and try to recruit really hard and recruit the best kids that are the best fit for our program that we can get, and train them the best way that we can that's the best for them and in the environment that we're in. So I don't think we're doing anything that's necessarily brand new. I just think that something that I love to do or passionate about it, and I think that shows. And I think when you're passionate about doing something and you have a vision and you really believe you can help it come true, then results are just kind of a byproduct of that process. So there's really not one thing, Mason, I could pinpoint to you that's saying, hey, here's what's led to our results, other than just a really hardworking staff. I've had great assistant coaches. We've recruited well. We've got some really good kids in the program, and more than anything else, they bought into the messages that we're giving the team, and happy to see the results kind of take hold of the work that we've put in.
So you touched on culture, and it's interesting talking to coaches, and even being part of the program. I was kind of the turnaround to the Lehigh program. That was always Coach Santoro's thing, or talking to any head coach. They always preach how important culture is. And I know, again, this is a very broad question, but if you could kind of nail it down into, kind of a succinct couple sentences, what's the culture that you guys are trying to establish at Army and West Point?
Yeah, sure. And I think that's pretty easy. I think there's a few things that if anybody is around our program, they should pick up on right away. There's 4 things that we talk about a lot in our program, and the first one is that we're tough and we don't complain. And I talk about that a lot, and I say mentally tough people don't complain about their circumstances. They make the most out of the situations that they're in, and hopefully when people around our program, they pick up on that. We don't complain, and we don't feel sorry for ourselves when things get tough. We make the most of any situation that we're in. I talk about we're a program that trains really hard, and I talk about the difference between working hard and training hard, where there's a lot of teams and a lot of individuals that work hard, but they may not train with a purpose every single day, and that's something that I try to focus on is training really hard. The third thing that we talk about, Mason, is that we choose to be positive, and we talk about being thankful and showing gratitude and being positive is a choice. And we want that as part of our program, that we're people that choose to be positive, because everything is not always ideal. And if you don't always choose to be positive, you may inadvertently, without even knowing it, make a choice to be negative. So we're really deliberate about choosing to be positive. And the last thing is that we love each other. And we have a big roster, over 40 athletes on the team. And it's impossible for 40 people to get along all the time. So, the analogy I use, and I'm fortunate enough to have a brother, is, hey, I love my brother as much as anybody in the world, and I didn't always like him growing up. And I think the guys on our team can relate to that, especially the ones that, you know, come from a family with siblings, is that, hey, you don't always like the people that you're with, but you can always choose to love them. So we're going to love each other, and I think that's really probably the most important backbone of our program, is that brotherhood. Those are things that not only we talk about, but things that we try to model as coaches, and things that we try to foster and build the program, things that I think are important for, you know, whether we were a wrestling team or any other sport. I think that those are, you know, important core values for a program to have, and those are things that, you know, I'm proud to see within our program.
So one of the things, you know, obviously at Army West Point, it's a very unique situation with the service academy and with all the things that come along with that. What kind of unique challenges has the service academy, you know, coaching at a service academy, what kind of unique challenges has that presented to you guys, not only just in recruiting, but maybe just in your day-to-day operations, you know, things that maybe someone who hasn't been through an academy or coached there, you know, wouldn't really know about?
Yeah, sure, man. And I've learned so much. I'm still learning every week. You know, I've been at West Point 3.5 years, and you know, I did not go to an academy, and so it's been pretty new to me. And you know, the way I would look at it is, I say that there's unique opportunities for us. Every school has its challenges. We're no different, but we have much more opportunities than any other place, and I really feel that's true. So, you know, I look at, we have unique opportunities here. Look, we have an opportunity to recruit people that know that they want to do something beyond the sport of wrestling, that while they're here, and what led them to West Point is wrestling. And wrestling is the most important thing to them at that time, but that they understand in 4 or 5 years that that's career, the most important thing to you is probably going to end in 4 to 5 years. And so we get to deal with some young people that understand that, and they're looking ahead, and they want to build a future for themselves and a future for other people. Now, dealing with that, there's some unique challenges, but really, I think the thing that's opened up, you know, my eyes the most, that I've been most impressed with at our athletic department at Army West Point, is just how much more similar it is to other programs than people would think. There's no doubt that we're different. We're unique, and it's a very good thing, but probably not quite as different as most people would think. We do most of the same things. It may look a little bit different, and it goes by a different name or probably a different acronym around here, to be honest with you. But, you know, we can do the same things. You know, these are guys that love wrestling, that want to be national champions, and they work out in the morning, they go to class, they work out again, and then they go do homework and rest and repeat. It just looks a little bit different, goes by a different name, but we can do a lot of the same things. The challenges in recruiting, we talked about this, you know, I talk with coaches all the time. They ask, is it hard to recruit to West Point? And I'll say, well, is it hard to recruit where you're at? And the answer is always, yeah. It's hard to recruit everywhere. Good wrestlers are hard to get. It doesn't matter where you're at. If you want to get better, recruiting is hard. If you just want to stay where you're at and not get any better, recruiting's pretty easy. You can keep bringing in the same guys that, you know, the type that you have. And, but when you're hungry to get better, recruiting is always hard. So, recruiting's hard at West Point, but you got to look, you know, we're one of the, you know, Forbes #1 public school in the country. And our guys graduate with a guaranteed job with no debt to pay, and a springboard into a fantastic career. You know, if they want to choose a career in the service, or if they want to get out of the service in 5 years, and, you know, have their resume at the top of the pile of anywhere they apply. So we have to have more conversations here at West Point, and different conversations in the recruiting process that you would have at most places. But the kids that we're after, the kids that we want, don't mind having those extra conversations. So, you know, when people ask me about, hey, what challenges do you face? The answer is pretty much the same. We face unique challenges, but we also have some really unique opportunities here. And I think that's how we've been able to recruit so well. And that's why recruiting is getting better and better for us every year.
Yeah, it's all what you make of it, right?
Sure. Hey, man, perspective is reality. And, you know, for us, it's just like we can choose to be positive. We can choose to see things as either opportunities or challenges. It's one way or the other. You know, I just don't allow myself to see everything as a challenge.
So in your time there, you guys have had a lot of firsts and done a lot of things that have moved the program forward or have shown progress. You won your first All-Academy championship in almost a decade. You guys had your best ever team finish out in Vegas. You're the first Army coach ever to beat Navy in 2 of your first 3 matches against them. Like I said, last year you were above 500. You've been top 4 EIWAs the last 2 years. Was there really, and I know you're still relatively new and everything there. And I know that there's a lot more that you guys want to do, but was there any one match, I know how big the Army-Navy rivalry is. Was there any one result or one point where you kind of really stepped back and could see that things were going the way that you wanted them? You know what I mean? That the tide was turning.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I'm probably guilty of this, like most coaches are, is that we don't take the time to sit back and reflect and maybe give yourself credit for the things that you've done. But that first Navy dual meet, and it was at home, my first Army-Navy dual meet, I thought that I knew how big it was too, until the dual meet, came. Then I realized it was much bigger than I thought. And here's why, is for us, it's a date on our schedule. It's a very important one. We want to win it. It's a rivalry match, so you always want to win those more than maybe just another match. But there are people literally all over the world that want you to win that match too.
Mm-hmm.
And they got your back, and that's what makes it special. I don't think until after that dual meet, and we had a social upstairs and above the arena. I probably didn't get out of there for like 2 hours, and just everybody wanted to talk. Everybody would come up giving me a hug, and I thought we won a really hard fought dual meet. I mean, the 2 teams were scrapping, fighting hard, and I felt proud that we won a really hard fought dual meet. And I think after that duel, I realized just how much it meant to some other people. So that's special to be a part of. I enjoy them all, and I think the most important win for me is always the next one. Like I said, I'm guilty of probably not slowing down enough, reflecting on what we've done. But I think that was a pretty special win that first year, and we're looking forward to building on that going forward, and being able to balance out the importance of those rivalries with being our absolute best in March. And we're not done yet. So, like I said, the most important and most proud victory for me will be the next one.
So, going back a few years, your first head coaching job was at Ouachita Baptist, and a Division II school in Arkansas, right?
That's right.
So, you literally took a program from scratch. You were the first ever head coach. And in a span of 4 seasons, 10 All-Americans, a couple finalists, 3 finishes in the top 15. In your 4 seasons there, literally taking a program from nothing and building it. What was that like? And what kind of lessons did you learn from that entire process? Because I have to imagine that would just be a really wild and eye-opening thing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, okay. I'll tell you about the first day I showed up at Ouachita. All right. So I interview, and I end up taking the job. One of my former coaches, Pat Smith, that was one of my coaches at Oklahoma State, was involved and still is involved in wrestling, in Arkansas. And, a guy that brought him out there by the name of Greg Hatcher is the one that brought me out to Arkansas. And, so I go and interview, and then about 2-3 weeks later, I actually show up at the school to take the job. And as I show up, I'm pulling up, and it's just me and a truck and a trailer at this point. And I pull straight up to the gym, and I go in there to meet some folks and walk into what's supposed to be my office. And as I walk in, there's people cleaning the office out. It was like a storage area. And they're getting like old VHS tapes out of there. I'm not kidding you. It was like basketball VHS storage room. And they're taking like mops and buckets and VHS tapes out of there. And I'm like, okay, this is my office. Obviously, it's on the bottom floor, no windows, right? And my office for like the first 6 weeks I was there was the Starbucks there on campus. And I mean, that really, it started from there, and it was that type of pace, like, you know, and that type of whirlwind. Really, I mean, I guess the 3.5 years I was there, when I got there, I mean, there was no wrestling room. We didn't have any recruits. There was no schedule, and this was in April, so April 1st. Nothing existed. It was an idea, and I was just hungry enough and dumb enough to think that we could do it, to get it done, and caught some really lucky breaks. Was so lucky on some of the kids that we were able to recruit early. That was just awesome, and just awesome kids. I mean, and tough as nails. Like, these guys would have wrestled Division I at a lot of schools and had really, really good careers. And so it was just fortunate. Things worked out. We just, you know, I busted my butt, and it was just me coaching there for the first 3 years, no assistant or anything. So it was just me. I was the coach, the laundry guy, cleaning the mats twice a day, taking care of the facility. I mean, it was the whole thing. So if you could imagine, what I tell people is, look, you know, a lot of people have this nice, you know, like linear process of being a head coach, where they're a volunteer or grad assistant, and then they get to be an assistant coach and associate head coach, and then they're well groomed and they're in their, you know, mid 30s or early 40s, and they take a head coaching job, and they're pretty good, you know, when they start. Me, you know, I mean, I came from the Oklahoma oil fields to, you know, going to coach in a Division II school in Arkansas because I missed wrestling so much. And so where most people are able to watch somebody else make these mistakes over about 15 years, I got to screw up everything on my own for 4 years. So I can't even talk about all the lessons I learned. And that was really a good thing. I got to learn them all by my own screw-ups. Like, I could not point to anybody else and say, you know, let me learn what they did. Not to say I didn't have good mentors that would, you know, try to save me from myself, but I didn't always listen either. If you can imagine running a program by yourself from scratch, you know, and trying to win national titles, and you know, especially as your first coaching job, I mean, the lessons I learned there, you know, I mean, I still use them today. When we get snowed out and the janitors or the cleaning people don't show up to clean the mats, you know, and I don't bat an eye. I'm like, oh, I can do this. I've done this a few thousand times, you know, and grab a bucket, clean the mats, and move on. So I think just learning that you can really rely on yourself, blue collar work attitude, gets a lot of stuff done. And that's probably one of the biggest things I took away from my time there.
So, you know, you mentioned it a couple times before. As an athlete, your situation, your program was a little bit different when you were competing. You know, you wrestled at Oklahoma State. You were part of 4 national title teams. You know, you were a couple-time national qualifier. You won Big 12s. You were part of the team that had 5 champs, right?
Yeah.
You know, so you came through the most historic program in college wrestling. You were a grad assistant there at one point and everything. You know, when you look back on your time at Oklahoma State as an athlete, as a grad assistant, what lessons and, you know, what things, experiences, you know, the whole 9 yards from that time do you still carry with you today? You know, that's such a, you know, like I said, a historic and incredible program with the people that permeate it. You know, what all do you carry with you today from that?
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing is that, you know, the further I am removed from the program, the more I can appreciate what I learned. I think when it's something that you do every day and you're around John Smith every day, and the amazing staff that we had, that's all that you know. So you really don't even know how special it is. I mean, you know it's special. You know, you win national titles, and that's something that's pretty special. But maybe didn't realize just how unique that culture was until I'm not a part of it anymore. And so I think the further I am removed from the program, the more I can appreciate it. Here's, you know, a few things that I'll take away from my time at Oklahoma State. Is one is the technical proficiency, you know, that we learned there. And you can't make up for that with very many other things. Like, you've got to have a certain amount of skills. And, John Smith may be one of the best technicians of all time. The guy knows the sport as well as anybody you're ever going to be around, period. And so just being able to soak up all that knowledge of the sport, but more than just, the technique of it all and the tactics is, the mental approach and how you do it. And I think, one thing that makes John such a good coach is just uncompromising standards. And their standards are to win. And, not settling for anything else, no matter what. Like, no matter what, we're going to find a way to win. Just having that attitude and seeing, exactly the work that it took to be great. And I didn't have the type of career that I dreamed of, and a career that I'm proud of. But, it wasn't what I dreamed about growing up, as being a 2-time national qualifier. I had hoped for a lot more for myself, but still being around other people that, won multiple national titles and being wrestling in 2 tournaments when we won the tournament, just seeing the incredible amount of work that has to go into it and the drive and the focus and the incredible amount of sacrifice that you have to make to be able to achieve those things. So I think being able to live it and then being able to removed from it a while, just realize how special that is. Like, you realize, well, not everybody's willing to sacrifice those things that we thought were normal. For us, it was normal you would leave practice and coach would tell you, here's what you're going to do tomorrow. And you just show up and do it. And, it's not that way everywhere, whether it's in wrestling or whether it's in the business world. Not many people are willing to make those type of sacrifices and have the kind of just unwavering focus on a goal. So I think, more than anything, that's probably been the most important thing I've taken away from my time at Oklahoma State.
So, really the last thing I wanted to bring up, you and I had a short conversation on Twitter about a suggested rule change, but I'm curious because I know you've got a lot of thoughts about the oddities of college wrestling. What are some...
I love wrestling. Amazing. Obviously I'm making a living doing it. I love it. It's an incredible sport. But I do think I can sit back and look at it and think, some things about the sport are maybe just a little bit goofy, or things that I think maybe that we could do a little bit better. Yeah, sure, there are some things.
So what would be at the top of your list? Give me, I don't know, 2-3 things.
Yeah, all right. We won't even put a number on it. We'll just start talking. We'll see where it goes. But what you and I were talking about on Twitter is, everybody in the wrestling world was going to watch that Wyoming and South Dakota State dual meet. We all wanted to see Meredith and Gross, and Coach Branch at Wyoming was one of my coaches, so I try to keep up with them. Ethan Kyle was one of my teammates, so we all keep up with each other. So I'm watching the dual meet. And I see on Twitter that they put the tape line, in the corner, like that's really going to hold anybody back, like, coach, stay inside this triangle. And I said, the coaching area in wrestling has to be one of our dumbest rules, no doubt. To think that you're going to be able to coach your athlete in the gym, that especially one that gets rowdy, and they're 50 feet away from you or whatever, and you're supposed to stay in this little corner. And you're not allowed to move back and forth. Here's what I think. I think that I think sports are emotional, and I think that wrestling, for sure, there is an emotional sport. Like, coaches and trainers, we spend thousands of hours with these athletes and, like, see everything, all their vulnerabilities, their ups and downs. We are 100%, fully invested in their careers. And to expect a coach to sit quietly in a corner while that athlete who they love and know as good as anybody in the world is out there competing is just a little bit, to me, it's just a little silly that you're going to expect this coach to sit back and relax and stay in his little corner and not, kind of approach the mat and get up and get rowdy when he has so much invested. I mean, it's not really a stretch to say at this level. I mean, that's your livelihood out there on the mat too, And I think emotions are a good thing in sports. I think that in our sport in wrestling, we should be able to let coaches be more emotional and more expressive from the corner. I think fans love it. I think wrestlers love it. I think the only people who don't love it are our officials. And I think that's an area of our sport that we could mature just a little bit more. I've been fortunate to be able to, like stand on the sidelines or be right on the, the front row seats of football and basketball games. And let me tell you, those coaches don't sit there quiet. I can tell you that. And whatever that coach is saying to that football referee out there, it's probably not G-rated TV. And I'm not saying that we should treat officials like that at all. I'm just saying that fans love it, athletes love it, and those officials, when they're professionals, they go about their business. They don't get involved in conversations with coaches, and hey, they let coaches say it, their piece, and they hear it out, and they get back to work. I just think that's one area of wrestling we could probably mature a little bit.
Yeah, I completely agree. I do think it's, and I think it's one of those situations where, kind of like you mentioned, you spend your entire life in wrestling, so sometimes you just accept things as fact and keep it moving.
Yeah.
But stepping back, you hit the nail on the head. Coaches and athletes go through so much together. I don't think, unless people have gone through it, it's a really hard relationship to describe. All the things that you go through together, the ups, the downs, and everything in between. And to not... And I think in a lot of ways, our sport, a lot of people within our sport don't want kids or coaches to, to really, really show emotion, which for the life of me, I can't understand. But, I feel
don't understand that.
From a celebration standpoint, whether, if it's a genuine show of emotion or, like you said, coaches getting fired up and, fighting for their guy in the corner. I think wrestling could benefit greatly from more displays of emotion, of genuine emotion.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I think, Jordan Burroughs' article he wrote recently, I think it was in one of the magazines, but, and he referenced that. He said, there's nothing wrong with a genuine display of emotion. When you're fired up, you shouldn't be afraid to show it. If you have some, planned celebration, and maybe, if it's not authentic, you lose a little bit there. I mean, I believe strongly that athletes and coaches, especially in the sport of wrestling, should be role models. So everything that we do need to understand that needs to be done with respect, and we need to pride ourselves on being a sport where we act like role models and we accept that. But there's a line, there, and you don't have to cross a line by showing emotion. You can show a lot of emotion, a lot more than I think that we're allowed to. In the sport of wrestling, there's so many judgment calls, right? I mean, it's up to one or two officials on the mat to make a judgment, and these calls can be really hard. So expect a coach not to, fight for their guy there, I think is, it's a little bit naive, or, coaches should be able to fight for their guys, especially in a sport with so much judgment is involved.
Yeah, I think that's really where it confuses me the most, is when you talk about judgment calls. And I think the rule, I could be wrong about this, but I think the NCAA rulebook actually states that you're not allowed to basically blatantly challenge an official's judgment.
Yeah, I think that's it. I'm usually good for a warning at dual meet. I think most coaches are, and let me tell you, most coaches, almost every single official, like when you go over and say, hey, look, I just want to explain my thoughts on this situation here, and I'm not really trying to question your judgment. I just want to say, here's what I saw. They'll hear you out. And 99% we're going to hear you out, and they're very professional about it. And then you get your warning because you're not allowed to question. But that's just kind of part of it. I obviously you can't call an official over to the table after every call that you don't like. That's not the answer. I think coaches being able to leave their coaching area, and obviously you can't run to the other side of the mat if it's a dual meet, but maybe if you can go halfway out on the mat. Listen, in football, there's like a halo rule, right? Like you can't come in an encroachment zone if somebody's catching a punt. And referees can officiate that. In football, I'm sure they can officiate stuff like that in wrestling, too. You can't be within whatever it is, 4 or 5 feet of the athletes that are out there on the mat. You can do that. I think if you watch the Iowa-Oklahoma State dual meet and heard John's comments afterwards, John was like, he said, I don't think anybody was, in danger there in the heavyweight match. The heavyweight's foot goes off of the mat and hits the hardwood floor like his toe,
Yep.
And John's like, that's a stupid rule, like nobody's in danger because his toes on the hardwood. You should let these guys wrestle. They're 6'3", and they're out there.
Yeah.
And the mat shrinks a little bit, is another kind of a goofy one. Here's one, Mason. So I was watching that dual meet too. And if you watched it, the match starts. I'm talking about the Wyoming South Dakota State dual meet. So the dual meet starts, and then the ref stops it and runs over the head table and gets the anklets to put them on.
Oh,
And
I'm
thinking
bands.
like, thank God, we know who's red and who's green. I wasn't sure who was going to be the home team, if it was the person in the South Dakota State singlet, or the one in Wyoming with the big cowboy on it. It's like, we buy these singlets for $150 a piece, but the only way to tell each other apart is like with a 25-cent piece of plastic around your ankle. I don't know. There's got to be a better way, man. It's not, it's not my job to solve all these problems right now, but the anklet one kills me. It's like, we spend all this money on uniforms, and you're telling me the only way I can tell the difference in South Dakota State, who's blue and white, in Wyoming, who's brown and gold, is by a red or green anklet. I'm like, come on, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah, that one. Ankle bands are one of my favorite ones to try to explain to non-wrestling people.
Well, yeah, like what do you say? Well, this person's red. Well, their uniform is black. Yeah, but he's red.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Wait, why can't you just have like a dark and a light? Because that's what they're wearing. Well, you're right. But that's just not how wrestling does it.
Yeah, nuts. What else? You give me some. What are some of the things that drive you nuts besides the anklet?
Oh man, there's all sorts of different things. I think, there are things I see the thought behind. So the sauna thing, I hate. I hate that saunas can't be a thing.
Yeah.
I totally understand everything that happened, and the sauna one is an almost endless rabbit hole to dive down. Because the problem with saunas is they're great except for the 0.5% of time.
That's right.
But how do you monitor it?
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. I mean, I use a sauna pretty much every day, and I love them. I get it. I'm like you, man. I understand that there were some tragedies in the late 90s, and things had to be done. You absolutely cannot afford that again. Not just as a sport, but just you can't afford that.
Yeah.
But is there a workaround? Is there enough evidence that saunas actually may be good for your body, but you can't use them? That's a good one there. You know what? And you're in the position where you don't have to deal with the NCAA. Maybe you can solve these problems too. See, I can't push too hard for these things. So
yeah,
maybe you can use your platform to push for some change here.
Yeah, saunas are one because they're so useful, and there's so many studies that show the positive health effects of them. So that's one I would love to see implemented. I'm trying to think of what else.
We finally got beards this year in college wrestling. That was a big deal.
Yes, the facial hair I have never understood.
Yeah. You can take somebody at skin check and say, you know what, go dry shave your face and then get out there on the mat, and that's going to be, the healthiest thing for everybody. So I'm glad we got away from that.
I will never forget at NCAA's one year, we're sitting there waiting to weigh in whatever day it was. It was either Friday or Saturday, and Corey Clark had to dry shave. And there aren't, nobody carries a razor with them.
Right.
So I had to laugh at this situation because we're sitting there at skin check, and they're so stringent on skin check, which they should be. I totally get that. And yet they're literally rummaging through whatever arena we were in to try to find which they eventually just found some random razor that Clark had to dry shave with. And I'm like, this seems counterproductive somehow.
Yeah, they had to do that for the health and safety of the athletes, right? So,
exactly.
yeah.
Like you went and found some old rusty racer.
Yeah. Dry shave and then get out there in those mats that were mopped yesterday and just pray for the best.
Yeah, I'm sure. What could possibly go wrong?
Right. No, man, I'm glad we figured that one out. If we can get past headgears next, that's the next thing. So we'll see if that gets brought up again.
Yeah, headgears are one. You should have the option, especially at a collegiate level. I can understand. I totally understand it at a youth level, like
For sure.
You want to protect kids and everything, but when you are a legal adult, just let the kid do what he wants to do. It's no different than anything else. Like, do you want to wear a knee pad? No? Okay, then don't wear a knee pad.
Right.
It's the exact same thing.
Yeah, I use the same analogy, like, what, to make everyone wear an elbow pad. Just, I saw somebody get their elbow hurt once, so we should all wear elbow pads, or mouthpieces because, whatever. But, no, I think Big Headgear lobbied pretty hard to make sure that didn't happen. And, but, for now we all have that picture of, old Blue from old school, with his beard and headgear. So that's where we're at.
I remember a couple years ago when we were getting ready, I was going to wrestle Shop in the All-Star Duel. And remember how ridiculous AJ's beard would get in the summer?
Right. Well, kind of like it is now, I guess. Or was it was way worse back then, huh?
Yeah, it was
or way better.
Well, depending on your perspective.
Right.
It was like full Duck Dynasty length. It was an incredible beard. And there's a picture of him, I'm sure you can still find it, of him working out in the Edinburgh room with this full beard, like this crazy shaggy beard that he hadn't shaved since the last day of NCAAs, and a headgear on.
Oh, that was it.
Yeah.
Love it.
It was perfect. Like the reference you just made with Old School and Blue.
Yeah.
Absolute to a T. That was AJ.
Yep. Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But no, I think the beard thing, I think that was a good one. Listen, I think the sport is changing and evolving. I think that things are headed in a really positive direction. But there's always like these little things, like things we've talked about. And I always, why do you get how many cautions do you get before it's a point? You get 2 before it's a point?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you get 2 cautions. Why do you get 2 cautions? Why do you need 2? In football, they don't get any. They don't get any freebies, in football.
That's true.
Well, yeah. Or basketball, if you cross the line just one time, there's no freebies. So they all count. But, why do you get 2 free cautions? I don't know. Does anybody know why you get 2? Just that's the way it is, I guess.
I'm glad we got 2 free cautions.
And there's always going to be those things.
I'm glad we got 2 free ones.
Oh, you use them both, huh?
Oh, I was a serial offender. My coaches hated it so bad. And the stupid thing was, sure enough, as soon as I used them, I was still great on whistles and I never jumped. But for some bizarre reason in the back of my head, I was like, oh, I got them. I might as well use them, right?
Yeah, hey, man. Burn them if you got them. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, but shoot, we could probably go on all night, man. We could talk about but the bottom line is, I love the sport. I think it's the greatest sport on earth. I think that, it teaches people lessons or helps teach people lessons, that other sports, may not, in the same way. And it just, what it does, what I love about wrestling, is what we talked about earlier, the emotion that's involved, because it's such a personal sport. And there's so many hours that go into working with people one-on-one. So as a coach, your challenge is to be able to develop people one-on-one and cast a shadow on the program that influences and impacts everybody at the same time, without where you got to find the balance in developing individuals and developing the culture of the team. There's no other sport like it, and where you get to test yourself as a competitor. So for all the goofy things, that we've talked about or could talk about, man, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I think it's, like you do, it's the greatest sport in the world, and I love it, and I just want to see it continue to improve.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, man. I love this sport more than I could explain. And I just, with all these, silly little things, you just want to see it continue to improve. And I don't want to see wrestling get in the way of itself the way that it has in a lot of instances, because it's been slow to change. So, continuing to grow and making it a more fan-friendly and just an easier sport to understand and adopt. I think that's incredibly important. And I think it's happening. So.
Yeah, right on. So do I. I feel good about where we're going. I hope that we continue to simplify the rule sets of the sport. I think maybe there's a little bit too much nuance in some of the rules, and it's too much is open for interpretation. I don't think you'll have to get rid of all of it by any means, but maybe a little bit too much nuance, too many rules. We could simplify some things, and at its essence, it's a struggle and a fight between one person and another. And if you can't watch that and pretty obviously tell who's winning a fight, and the score and the rules reflect that, well, that should be an area for improvement. I think it's a sport that anybody should be able to watch and tell you who's winning, because you should be able to watch a fight and know who's winning the fight. So, if we simplified, our rules in a few areas may help with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, hey, Coach, you got anything else for us, before we wrap up here?
No, man. Hey, I appreciate it. I love talking wrestling, and I've chosen and been lucky enough to do this for a living. So I get to talk it all day, and then when I get home, I get to try to talk to my wife about wrestling too. So I could talk wrestling all day, and I appreciate you're a thoughtful guy when it comes to wrestling, and the way you look at the sport, and I hope you keep spreading the good word, and I appreciate you having me on, and especially giving me the time to talk a little bit about our program at Army West Point. We're really proud of it, and like you said, been able to accomplish some things that haven't been done in a long time here, and our recruiting is going better and better and better, and we're winning and competing at a higher and higher level every year. So we're excited about that, and look forward to building the program even more.
Awesome, man. Hey, anytime you want to come on, we'd be more than happy to have you. Thank you for taking the time. Keep crushing it at Army West Point. You guys are doing awesome things, not just on the map, but the program as a whole. It's awesome to see. So, hey, thank you again, man. And I'm sure we'll see you around soon.
You got it. All right. Take care, Mason.
You too, Coach.
Yep.
Bye. All right, and we want to thank Army West Point head coach Kevin Ward again for coming on the program. Incredible conversation. Maybe a little bit longer than some of the ones we've had, but well worth the listen. Incredible insight from him about their program, as well as his experience at Oklahoma State, and some of the funny oddities that exist in college wrestling. So one more time, we're gonna put it on you guys, as guys and girls, as listeners. Hit us up with questions, whatever it may be. We're willing to discuss just about anything. So hit us up with some questions, get engaged, get involved. We like to have a good time. All right, so hit us up. Text, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Facebook, or not, I said Facebook. MySpace, there we go. That's the thing I was thinking of. I don't think I ever had a MySpace, but hey, if you want to go make a MySpace for me and send me messages on there, I will log in and check them. So that said, Tristan, take us out.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for us at the PA Power College Podcast. Thanks again for dialing in. I'm Tristan Warner. Find me on Twitter at WarrenTriz, and you can find Mason on Twitter at Beck_Diggity. Visit PAPowerWrestling.com for all your wrestling needs, and be sure to follow us on Twitter at PAPowerWrestle, and send us a friend request on Facebook. Until next time, stay classy, wrestling fans.